Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. Jonathan, in our last conversation, you shared your story about how Blog Talk Radio show came to be and the miracle from Yvonne Orr, the very first phone call that you had received on that talk show.
Yeah.
I was curious, how many years did this radio show run, and what are the events that took place during this time period?
Oh, okay. So, first of all, years of the radio show, it's kind of a blur. The radio show started around, and I can't tell you the exact year, but it is in the Kleck Files, and the very first episode is in the Kleck Files, the one with Yvonne Orr. People can go find that. A guy named Robert Chandler, by the way, who should get a shout out and a big hug from everybody. Robert Chandler was led to archive all the Kleck shows, the radio shows, the blog talk, all the blog talk shows, all the YouTubes, and even the 2 YouTube channels that were shut down. I think probably with mirrored views, there's several 100 million views, probably total. But in Robert Chandler, he archived all the videos, all the blog talk. So it's available on kleckfiles.com. Answer to the question is, I don't know how many years Blog Talk ran, but it ran concurrently with a lot of other stuff I was doing, like YouTube, was part of that came into being during all that, Justin TV, Blog Talk, and the radio. And then at a certain point, it was so much. I was doing so much, 2 hours a night, live 3 times a week, I believe. I think that's what it was. I know it was at least twice a week. I think it was 3 times a week. And it was a 2-hour live program. So it was a whole lot of content. And I was also, in other platforms. So at a certain point, the Lord told me, okay, now just stick with YouTube.
Yeah.
But during those times, I think one of the most important things to just tell the audience is that's when the Lord was rolling out all these super crazy miracles. And I wasn't, I don't know how to put this. Okay, so I'm talking to you, you, anyone. I'm talking to anyone. Okay, if you got saved and then you're exhibiting a supernatural ability to see, and I had drawn in the hieroglyph of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and it was beyond the human brain what I was able to do, that I heard the Lord tell me, I want you to blow that hieroglyph up into a poster. It was in National Geographic. And then I heard the Lord tell me to build a light board like you would put x-rays on in a doctor's office. They used to take the x-rays and stick them up on these big light boards and read your x-rays. So I heard the Lord tell me to do that, and I did what he said, and I blew up a poster of Akhenaten and Nefertiti out of National Geographic. I put it on this giant light board, and then the Lord just took hold of me. So the Spirit of the Lord took hold of me and just started drawing in on a clear plastic layover the images that were hidden in all the watermarks and the shadows. And I thought for a minute maybe I had lost it or something. I was like, why in the world am I doing? Okay, I know I heard the Lord say do this, but this is so weird. And so I did what he said. I built the light board. I blew up the poster. I got clear plastic layovers. And as I stood there and said, okay, what are we doing? He started drawing in through me. He used me as a platform to draw in what was hidden on that hieroglyph. And it was a serpent race destroying a sheep race by breeding. That's the best short version of what it was. And so, when I saw him do that and use me to do it, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And it started having a common denominator. Not only was the hieroglyph this ancient Egyptian hidden agenda of a serpent race of beings that are hidden inside a host body, because the serpent person is hidden inside like a human, and they're breeding with a human, and then they're having a hybrid human. Well, the serpent is killing the sheep inside the head of the children, and that's crazy because that ended up being what was being manifest to me. Like someone, I think So I'm going to tell you guys a couple testimonies, if that's all right.
That'd be awesome.
About people drawing pictures of me
Yeah.
with the exact same agenda. Now, here's the thing. This is super important. We're going to have to jump back to the past for a minute. Back before I got saved, I had an art gallery downtown in Southtown, and there was a guy named Marcel, and he was from Guatemala, and he came up one day and just offered me a piece of wood that he had drawn a caricature of me on. And so he drew this caricature of me, and he had fangs on me because I had vampire sunglasses down there. One of my vampire sunglasses, like little outlets, was down there and where we did our stuff. So anyway, he drew a picture of me, a caricature, and he put fangs on me like a vampire. He put a pair of sunglasses sitting up on my forehead. But he made my eyes closed. So both my eyes were closed. And when he gave it to me, it was in 2001. And I just thought, no, that's kind of a good caricature, just like, oh, thank you. It was kind of just, oh, okay. And he was an artist, and so he didn't speak any English, but I accepted it graciously and was like, oh, thank you. That's kind of cool. You just drew a picture on a piece of wood. I couldn't see that there was anything hidden on it, not a thing. After I got converted, and the Bible says that Jesus said he was going to open the eyes of the blind. After I got converted, I looked at that thing again, and I was like, why the hell is there a dead sheep on top of my forehead? Why is there a goat on the back of my head? And I turned it upside down, and there's a serpent eating me.
Wow.
And I was like, what the heck? Well, I hadn't done the hieroglyph yet. And when I saw that, I freaked out. I was like, what in the hell is going on? Because the virgin, when you turn the virgin upside down, it's a dead sheep. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, why would somebody do? And I'm thinking, okay, this guy's part of some like coven of witches or whatever. And even though I was saved, it takes a while to burn off, as you've come to find out.
Yeah.
You don't just, when you're saved, the old habits and the old Johnny goes away and the old Zach goes away. But you also have to it takes a little bit of time to lose all those pre-programmed knee-jerk reactions. Yeah. I was on my way down there to talk to him. It wasn't going to be a friendly talk either. Yeah. I was going to demand answers. When I got there, he was gone, and so I was left holding a piece of wood, wondering, like, why the hell is there a dead sheep on top of my head, a goat on the back of my head, and a serpent eating me? And I was just freaked out by it. Well, like I said, an image of the Virgin has the exact same agenda. It's the Virgin, and it's a dead sheep with its tongue sticking out. And you'll see a serpent hidden in the watermarks of a lot of the images of the Virgin as well. Wow. And so I was just like, okay, that's crazy. So anyway, I put that on the shelf, and a lot of times I go like this, because when stuff happens that I'm not fully understanding, I put it on the shelf or put it on the visor, because you give it a little time, something will happen, and you'll pull it right off the visor, and it'll make sense. Yep. As you've come to find out.
Yeah,
wisdom. Yeah. So anyway, so then let's just kind of float around. We're going to go back to that time shortly after I got saved. Now, okay. I brought this book out for a reason. It's called the ABCs of the Bible. This is a different copy than the one I originally bought, but I want you to see it's a big white book. And the reason I want you to see that is because other testimonies I have on YouTube, I describe it as a big white book.
Sure.
And it is. This one happens to have a book cover. So anyway, the reason I want you to see this is because I want to tell you guys about what happened to me with all the miracles. And it was so overloading me, and I was so freaked out by it, that one day I was drawing in an image of the Virgin, and there was an agenda of a little boy being sexually abused by a Catholic priest. And I have shown you that one. Yeah. And I freaked out. I was like, I lost it. I was like, what the F? And there's a lot of F-bombs going on. And I was like, what is this? What is this? And I was yelling at the ceiling. I knew the Lord was there. I'm like, what is going on? Why are you showing me this? Who am I to you that you would show me this? And because I'm like, why would the Lord show me a little boy being sexually abused and hidden in images of the Virgin and all this, and sheep being destroyed and all that stuff? And I freaked out. So anyway, this book right here, the ABCs of the Bible, I had a copy of this in my apartment, and this was after I'd gotten saved. And when I started yelling, I mean, literally freaking out because I couldn't understand. And I heard the Lord tell me, open this book. Now, here's the thing. One day, I was led to go into a bookstore, and it was a used bookstore called Half Price Books.
Okay.
And I was like, what am I even doing here? Like, I don't go to used bookstores. So once I was in the store, I had to kind of like, okay, why am I even in the store? And so I walked around, I went upstairs, and it had a section that had religious stuff. And that's, yeah, now I remember I was like looking at like maybe a religious book or two, like trying to figure out some of the stuff that was going on. And I saw this book, it's called The ABCs of the Bible, and it's mainly artwork. So I bought it and I took it home and it just sat there. And at the point that I freaked out, after I was drawing in the image of that one virgin, I yelled at God and I said, who am I and why would you show me all this stuff? And who am I to you that you, the Lord, would show me of all people all this stuff? And when I opened up the book, it said the meaning of names right there. You mind if I read it real quick?
Please.
So it says, so now just take a moment and imagine that you've been converted. You're seeing stuff that you can't understand completely. There's children being sexually abused. There's serpents eating sheep. There's people dying. It's like, it's hidden in the shadows. Okay, well that's pretty freaking disturbing. And so when I lost it, I screamed. I said, "Who am I? Why are you showing this to me?" And I opened up this book and it said, "The meaning of names." So when I was like, I'm going to read this real quick. It says, the ancient Israelites believed that names had mystical powers and that in many ways reflected the character and destiny of a person. Usually a baby was named at birth, although by New Testament times, parents of sons probably waited until the time of circumcision. 8 days later, either the mother or the father selected the name, often with the advice of relatives and neighbors. Many names incorporated one of God's appellations, showing the parents' devotion and trust in God. For instance, Jonathan means Yahweh has given.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's when I knew. When I read that, after yelling, and I mean, I was yelling, I was freaking out because there was a kid being sexually abused in an image of the Virgin.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah, and I was like, nah! And when he showed me this, I was like, okay, I work for Yahweh then. That now you're showing me, obviously I work for you, you're Yahweh, and I work for you, and you're using me to give information, and I was able to understand then. And at that point, once I understood that, then he started using me to do bigger and other type miracles, some of which you've gotten to see. One of the first ones was I was at a coffee shop called Jim's. Do you mind if I just go into them?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So I was at Jim's coffee shop, and I used to go there and drink coffee in the mornings. And a waiter walked by, and he walked by me. His name was Mark. He's just kind of a good old boy, you know, a little older than me. And he walked by, and I heard the Lord say, "Get up and lay hands on Mark."
Oh.
And I was just sitting there drinking coffee, and I hear, "Get up and lay hands on Mark." And I'm like, lay hands on Mark for what? You know, like.
You didn't know what his ailment was.
I had no idea he was sick. I was just like, I was like, I'm just sitting there drinking coffee. Stand up and lay hands on Mark, like right now, do it.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, it was super awkward. And but I wanted to be obedient. That's my trademark. I want to please the Lord. And so Mark had walked by me. I heard the Lord say that. So I got up and I started following Mark, and Mark was walking towards, you know how the waiters have their own little waiter station?
Oh, yeah.
Where the tea and the refills and all that are. So Zach's worked in the food industry.
Yeah, I'm very familiar.
Yeah, so you have your waiter station. So I stalked him over to the waiter station, and he got there, and his back was to me, and he was getting a new thing of tea, you know, a pitcher. And I was standing there, and he turns around, and you can imagine, so you're a waiter, if someone was standing right behind you and you turn around, and they're standing right there, you'd be like, ugh.
Yeah, definitely awkward.
Could I help you?
Not necessarily welcome.
Yeah. That's exactly the way to put it. You're not necessarily welcome there. And so Mark turned around, and I'm standing right there, and he goes, hey, John, how's it going? You know, like very awkward. And I looked at him and I said, Mark, I'm so sorry. I just have to do this. And he was like, and he was much bigger than I, so, but it was an awkward moment. He looked at me like, what? And I said, I need to pray over you, Mark. And then he looks at me and he goes, and he just got this really peaceful smile on his face. And he goes, okay. And I put my hand right here, and then I put my other arm on my hand on his arm. And I prayed for his health and his restoration to good health. Now, here's a weird thing. I had no idea something was wrong, so I probably thought, man, I look like a lunatic.
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I look like a total loon. And I'm like, oh, so I finished praying, you know, it was short. It was real short. Heavenly Father, God, please restore Mark to good health and please bless him with good health. And so anyway, I finished and I look at him and I'm like, I'm going to go back to my table now. So I go back and I sit down. About 2 weeks later, I go back in there and Mark, I'm sitting there drinking coffee a couple weeks later and Mark comes walking up and he's a tall fella and he's kind of looming over me and he's like, John, how'd you know? John, how'd you know? And he's crying and he's like just starting, how'd you know, John? And I'm just sitting there and I totally forgot. I totally forgot. And I'm like sitting there like, what are you talking about, Mark? He goes, John, how'd you know? I had what was it? Not colon, yeah. He had colon cancer. He said, I had colon cancer and they were trying to decide how to treat it because it was, you know, everywhere and they were trying to figure out what to do and how to treat it at University Hospital. And I'm sitting there like going, no way, no, are you serious? And he's sitting there just crying. Yeah, and I went back after you prayed for me, it's gone. And I'm like, what? You're kidding me, really? And I was like, I didn't even know you were sick.
Sure.
And he's like, it's gone, man. And so, yeah, and I actually, I saw one of the waitresses just a couple weeks ago at the grocery store. And this was almost 20 years ago. And she said he just recently died from cirrhosis of the liver. But anyway, so the laying on of hands on Mark without knowing he was sick, and he was, he was scared. And that was one, and then it was off to the races. Then after that,
so that's already a whole list of miracles start from those other interviews we did. Do you have more miracles that you would like to add on to it?
So there's a couple that I think are so cool that I think they should be part of the record.
If you want to hop into a couple of those.
One was so I never cast out a demon, but the Bible says these signs will accompany those that believe on my name. They'll lay hands on the sick and they'll recover. They'll cast out demons. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you have to do that to believe on the name of the Lord, but those that the Lord sends out as his messengers, he makes sure that he empowers them and he gives them his credentials. That's why when he sent out the disciples 2 by 2, they were given the same power that he had to lay hands on the sick and cast out demons and those type of things. So anyway, so I was starting to find out that this was real for sure. And I was on my way to file some paperwork at the San Antonio courthouse, and I was in a Ford Explorer, I believe, and I had a way to get to the courthouse, but I didn't want to go down there and find parking and all the just stuff. Anyway, so I was on a street called McCullough, and I saw this bus coming, and I was familiar with the bus system, and so I went, oh, I know that bus. It goes straight to the courthouse. So when I saw it coming, I pulled over in Almas Park by Panchitos, and I pulled over and I got out of my vehicle and I got right there at the bus stop, and when the bus stopped, I got on the bus, paid the fare, and I went and I sat down in the very first row. Now there's a bench. When you walk on the bus, there's a bench to the right and to the left, and your back is to the window. 3 people can sit, 1, 2, 3, and then there's the first bench that faces forward, and there's a little wall right there. Okay, well, I sat right there on the right side of the bus, like if the driver's over there, I'm over here, and I'm in the very first bench facing the front. And when I sat down there was a lady right in front of me. So right here is the side of the lady's head, right here. And she's looking this because her head is to the back of the window, and I'm looking out the front window. And so I'm looking at her and I'm noticing just how clean she looked. I noticed she was really put together. The word is kempt, K-E-M-P-T, kempt. She was very well kempt, and she was just looked so together. And I noticed it, and I was just like, wow, she looks so together. She's just like really nice. She had this sundress, and it was folded over, and her hair was real nice, and she just looked really clean and nice. And and I'm sitting there looking at her, and she has a soda, Coca-Cola, and she starts rocking, and she puts the soda up to her mouth like this, and she starts going, and I'm looking at her like, what the heck? And the soda is drizzling down her chin, and it's going in that sundress that's folded over. It's like the dress is folded, and it's running down on her boobs, and now it's hitting the dress, and it's kind of opening it up, and her bra is just taking the brunt of this Coca-Cola just going on her chest. And I just thought, oh wow, look how nice and clean she looks. And now all of a sudden she's got Coke just drizzling down going, and she's just making this like laughing noise like the devil. And she's going, and now so she's going this way in front of me, and then she goes, how is your trouble? How is your struggle with Jesus Christ? And I'm like, so she's talking that direction towards, the other bench, and I'm just watching the side of her head going like, what? And she goes, how is your struggle with Jesus Christ? And I'm thinking, who the hell is she talking to? Because there's no one over there. And then she rocks back, how is your struggle with Jesus Christ? And she starts coming towards me. And then she jumps up and she goes, how is your struggle with Jesus? And she's coming over the freaking wall, the little, retainer. And she's coming over at me. And I'm like, ah! And I put my hand on her shoulder. I think it was like the third time, she's like, how is your struggle with Jesus Christ? How is your struggle with Jesus? How is your struggle? I'm like, ah! And I put my hand on her shoulder. Yeah. And then I say, peace be still. And I'm like, what? I was like, who said? I'm like, did I just say peace be still? And I got my hand on her shoulder, and she's frozen. And I'm thinking, who said peace be still? That had to be me. And I know it came out of my mouth, but it wasn't me. And I'm like, weird. And I look back, and there's all these people and all those other bitches, and they're all leaning forward because they all want to see what's going on. And I got my hand, and I look up at it, and then I go, I cast you out in the name of, and she goes, Jesus, and I go, Jesus Christ. She starts saying it, but I go, Jesus Christ. And then she goes, bam, and she slams up against her seat and the window, and she goes, Kish! And I'm like, oh, no, it kind of looked like a and then I look back at the people on the bus like, no, like I did not hit her. She just flew back. I'm serious. And she goes, Kish! And I'm like, oh. And then I look back at them, and then the bus stops, and I'm like, ah. And then I look up because now the bus stops, and then I look up, and she's standing right here, and I'm like, oh, yeah. What are you doing? Oh, she's standing right above me. And I'm like, oh no. And she goes, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm just like, ah. And so she walks off the bus. But she went from, how's your struggle with Jesus Christ? To, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I was just like, okay. So anyway, the next bus stop, I bailed off that bus, and I didn't have a cell phone with me. I ran to a payphone, and I called Lou, and I was like, dude, you are not going to freaking believe what just happened. So yeah, that was my San Antonio cast a demon out story, and I was just like, wow. That is insane. Oh yeah.
Do you want to just rapid fire a couple testimonies?
Yeah, let's do another one. So yeah, that was a crazy one.
Yeah.
Then the house that we're in right here, when I got this house, it was such a dump. It was so bad. This house was an absolute disaster. And it was my dad trying to clear his conscience because they had taken so much money from me.
Sure.
And so anyway, so I'll make this a quick one because there's a pile of supernatural things that started happening. Juan Longoria was one on this house. the plumbing, we had to dig a tunnel under this house to replace this plumbing. It was really bad. We had to tunnel under the house and replace all the plumbing all the way to the street. Big job. Anyway, Juan Longoria was over here, and he was sitting out front, and he was having a bad day because for the third time, the pipes that he had glued together had fallen apart. And I was like, Juan, I was like, listen, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to glue them myself, because he couldn't read. He was illiterate. He never went to school, and he couldn't read, and he didn't know that. And he was working for his brother, had a plumbing company, and he didn't know that once you clean the pipe and applied the glue, it had to be done within basically a minute of that time. And he would sit around talking for 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, like, oh, here, let me put that. And so anyway, so his pipes fell apart several times. So he was out in front of this house, and he was just really depressed. And I walked out there. I'm like, don't worry about it. Most people, if it was your house, you would have freaked out. Most people would have freaked out.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I was being really chill about it. I was like, you know what, don't worry about it, dude. I'm going to glue the pipes. Let's just get under there. And he was like, you know, I got all these problems. He had one eye that was glazed over. And he just kind of decided to spill his guts to me one day because of the plumbing issues. And got, man, I got all this. My brother's upset. And he had girl problems, like wife stuff. And he was just kind of pouring out his heart. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, and on top of it, I'm blind in this eye. I can't see nothing out of my one eye. And then right then he goes, he says, I feel like the Lord's God may be trying to tell me something because of all the problems I'm having. And I said, and then I started buzzing, and I went, well, maybe he is trying to tell you something. And then I just started buzzing, and then he mentioned his eye again, and I said, hey, Juan, look, I'm going to lay hands on you. And this guy's a gangbanger from Mexico. We're talking, you know, coke dealer, and he was telling me about his past, and it wasn't good. I mean, we're talking hardcore. And so I said, I'm going to lay hands on you, Juan. And he went, like, he physically, like, you know, and I was like, no, dude, I'm going to pray over you. I'm going to lay hands on you. And I said, and the Lord's going to heal your eye. And I was like, did I just really say, I thought to myself, did I really just tell him that the Lord's going to heal his eye?
It's a bold claim.
Yeah, it's a big claim to say it right then. And so anyway, he says, he's like, okay, he bows his head. And then I prayed, and you know, just like I did with Mark, I put one hand on him, and I prayed for the restoration of his sight and his eye. And then he, you know, he lifts up his head, and I looked at him right after I prayed, and I went, don't worry, it'll come. And I went, what? I just told the guy, don't worry, it'll come, like with such confidence. I'm like, don't worry, it'll come. Like it's going to happen for sure. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Johnny, you know, like, dude. But I said it with just total authority. I said, don't worry, it'll come. And then I went, did I just tell you, don't worry, it'll come?
So that was another instance where you just became a vessel of speaking for the Lord.
Absolutely. Sure. And so we walk around the house and we crawl in our tunnel, and I tell him, hey, I'm going first. So anyway, I'm crawling down this tunnel, and it's real dark, and we have headlights on. And as I'm crawling through, I hear this guy behind me going, hey, dog. And I'm like, yeah, Juan, it's like really tight quarters. And I can't really turn around and look in a tunnel that's only as wide as your body. Right. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? He goes, hey, dog. And I'm like, and it's all wet, you know, we're crawling on our hands and knees through muddy water and clay. And he goes, hey, dog. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? He goes, you're not going to believe this, dog. And he covers his good eye, and he goes, I can read. I can see the pipe right there. I can see the lettering on the pipe. And I got my dickies on, my coveralls, and I'm like, hang on, Juan. And I reach in my pocket and I get out my phone. Yeah. I'm like, okay, now talk. And he's like, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I can see. I couldn't see, now I can see. And he's freaked out. And he's under the house in the dark, in the tunnel, and his vision came back. Wow. And then I was like, oh, praise God. So I documented it on my cell phone under the house, and then we came out, and I videotaped him coming out of the mud. It was like, I don't know how to describe it. I think it was one of the Psalms, the Lord called me out of the miry clay. Anyway, and he came walking out, he came crawling out, and his eye was restored. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So that was another one, Juan Longoria. And then Kat Young. Kat, you know Kat. Kat's, you guys hear about Kat all the time.
Yeah.
Kat has been a good friend of mine for a long time. Anyway, Kat used to come on the radio occasionally as a call-in, and I would let her, come on and talk and ask questions. And one time she had contacted me, I forgot, maybe on the phone or whatever, and they were going to come to San Antonio. Her and her son wanted to come to San Antonio and just get together and meet. And they run on a very tight budget, and something happened where they had kind of a windfall financially, and her husband was able to miss work, and she wanted him to come with her. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So they came to San Antonio, and we went to a place called River Center Mall, and we were sitting in River Center Mall, and Kat brought up her husband's eye, and he had an incurable eye problem.
Yeah.
And she had brought it up that, they were at the hotel where they were staying, and she had heard the Lord say something about asking to heal Dave's eye. And right then I heard the Lord say, stand up and pray over Dave right now. And it was mega fear factor. I was standing in a picnic area with hundreds of people that were having lunch at River Center Mall, and it was packed, and I was just like, okay. Yeah. So stand up in front of everybody, and I'm like, oh, hear the Lord.
Obedience time once again.
Yeah, obedience time. It's like you had to overcome this, what other people think. If you care what other people think about you, you can't do what I do, and what the Lord has me do. And so then, I stood up and I just prayed over Dave's eye. Of course, I tried to keep it just, normal tone. And I prayed for the restoration of his eye, and it was completely incurable, the doctor said. So anyway, so Dave took the step of faith, tossed his meds. He went back to town. His eye was fine. They had taken spinal fluid out of his spine and all these things to try and relieve the pressure, because I forget what he had, but he had all this pressure in his eye and it was swollen, and they had to just give him medication, and they said it was incurable. Anyway, so when he went back to his house or his home, he wanted to go see the doctor just to confirm. I remember Kat was a little put out by it. I was like, let him go to the doctor. And she goes, but it's healed. And I said, let him go to the doctor. He should. And so he went to the doctor, and he told his doctor, well, this is what happened in San Antonio. And the doctor said, well, that's the only thing I would believe, because your eye was incurable. The only thing I would believe is a miracle, because it wasn't curable. So that's when I started realizing, wait a minute, my son's eye, Juan Longoria's eye, Dave's eye, and I'm like, there's a pattern here.
A lot of sight being restored.
A lot of sight being restored, yes. Also, Jory Lamb, yeah. I stopped by there on the way to the Grand Junction getaway. She was in Las Vegas. She had an eye thing. I forgot what it was, but she had to get needles, injections in her eye. And after I stopped by and laid hands on her, that was the first time that she hadn't had to get injections anymore. The doctor was like, wow, whatever it was, he said, had stopped in its tracks.
Wow.
So anyway, I realized that the Lord was using me, obviously, as, a servant. And the miracles and the healings were also at his behest, never at my behest. For example, there's been times I've wanted to lay hands on a lot of people that I've seen that I wanted to lay hands on. And the Lord will say no. It's not that you can just pick and choose who you want to go lay hands on. That's not the way it works. Because then it becomes for your own glory.
Right.
And it's for the Lord's purposes. And he does it, and I don't fully understand it all, but he lets me know when he wants me to lay hands on someone. And it's rather frustrating sometimes, because I would choose to lay hands on everybody if I could. I would be driving all the time,
Absolutely.
But yeah, then there's a little girl, Lexley. She was legally blind at the Grand Junction get-together, and all these people were saying, Johnny, there's this little girl, they drove 2,000 miles to get here. or her grandmother drove her, you got to lay hands on her. And I was like, oh God, stop. I was like, guys, stop. That's not the way it works. And then another person, Johnny, there's this little girl. She's legally blind. She's here. You need to lay hands on her. And the pressure, I'm just like, okay, guys, and this is at the Grand Junction. Get together. And someone had just told me that for like the third or fourth time. And I was starting to get real anxious, like, okay, stop, please just stop. And someone just told me that. And then I turned around to kind of walk away. And I turned around and I almost walked over this little girl. And she's standing there looking up at me with these big, thick lenses, like, and I look down at her and I go, hey, who are you? And she goes, I'm Lexi. And I was like, what's going on? And she was with her grandmother. That was the person everyone was talking about. And the Lord made it happen right then. Because I kept saying, look, if the Lord wants it to happen, he'll make it happen. And right then I turn around and almost walk over. Yeah. Oh. And I'm like, hey. And then it's her. And so sure enough, I said, you know what, let's all hold hands. So I held hands with her grandmother and prayed for her restoration. And I told her, Lexi, I don't know what's going to happen, but I guarantee you something's going to happen, because I wouldn't be buzzing this hard, and the Lord wouldn't have me doing this unless he planned on doing something for you. And I said, so don't put God in a box. It may not happen how you think, but just wait. And so I prayed over her, and then I heard from her grandmother. The grandmother had some ailment as well. She said the prayer with her granddaughter also healed her leg or something. She had some problem that was with her leg, and it was well right away. And then Lexi's vision went to almost perfect, almost like wow. From like 20/30 or something. Anyway, they contacted other people that were contacting me saying her vision's like almost normal. So yeah, and I was like, wow, so he's given me the ability over and over again to do miraculous, laying on of hands type things.
Do you have any more you want to throw out there?
What about the whispering? Oh, that was Brandon. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so Brandon's dad was dying of cancer. I think he had cancer or something. He was at home, and Brandon kept telling me, Johnny, I want to get you over. And I said, Brandon, the Lord told me that I can go over to your dad's house. And Brandon was trying to get me over there, but the mom and the family was trying to keep me away, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure on that. But it didn't work out. And then the dad went into a coma. And he was in a coma, and Brandon called me up. So I think at that point, they were willing just to let me come over now.
Sure.
And so the Lord told me, when you go over there, I want you to whisper into his dad's ear, because I live, you will live also. And everyone will know that he heard you. And I'm like, I was just like, what? And so I was like, okay. So I called Brandon up and I said, Brandon, here's what I heard the Lord say. So I went over there, and and let's just be honest. I mean, I've been the only white guy at an all-black karate dojo, and there is a difference if you're the only white person and it's all black people, and it is a difference if you're the only black person and everybody else is white. There is a reality, and it feels a little bit different. Yep. So I went over to Brandon's house, and I walked in the door, and there was a whole bunch of family members, and everybody's black, which is fine. I'm one of my best friends for most of my life has been black. And I walked in the door, but I was the kind of, the oddball walking in the door, right? And so I walk in the door, and everybody kind of looks at me, and then I just, hi, I'm Forrest Gump. And I'm going to go down this hallway where Brandon's dad is in the bedroom in a coma. And he had been in a coma and had not moved in 24 hours. And so I went in the bedroom, and Brandon's mom was there, and I think Brandon's aunt. And we're there in the bedroom with his dad, and his dad was in a complete coma on the bed, had not moved, no sign of anything in 24 hours. So I told them, this is what the Lord told me. I'm going to whisper in his ear, and this is what the Lord told me to whisper, because I live, you will live also, and you will know that he heard me. And they're like, okay. And so we all prayed together, and then I went and I put my hand on Brandon's dad, and I whispered into his ear. And while I had my mouth right down by his ear and I was whispering, I mean, I hear this, oh my God, oh, his eyes open. Oh, and these two women that were in the bedroom, they freaked out, man. They were, oh my God, his eyes open, his eyes open. And he opened up his eyes from a complete coma. Oh. And then I of course, I'm down here and I pop up and I'm looking at his eyes and I'm like, they're not open. Yeah. I'm like, Dad, it's here. And I go, and she goes, oh my God, his eyes were wide open. And I look at the lady and she goes, oh, yeah. Wow. And I look over like, ah. And he opened up his eyes twice. And the Lord, you've seen this, he'll do things twice when he really wants me to know it's him for sure. He'll do it twice. It's kind of a thing. Anyway, so yeah, Brandon's dad opened his eyes twice, and then I said, okay, now the Lord's telling me it's time for me to leave, and I love you guys, and I got to go, and I left, and then his dad passed away right after that. Yeah. So yeah, that was a super crazy, and you talk about crazy faith. I mean, walking into that situation and telling these people, look, I know he hasn't moved an inch in 24 hours, but when I whisper in his ear, and I didn't, that's what he said, whisper. Don't talk loud, whisper. And I whispered into his ear. So I'm not like, hey, you know, it was very quiet. I whispered into his ear and his eyes opened up wide and he was like, oh, and they freaked out. I freaked out. Anyway, but that was another crazy miracle. Then there was George and Marty who were helping me work around here, and George had a horrible affliction. George would pass out, like he said, it felt like ants on his head. I forget the name of the diagnosis, but there's no way out of it. It's like some schizoid thing, and they say that once it starts, it never stops, and his brain has to reset. Mm-hmm. So he has to pass out, be unconscious, and he comes up again, and then his brain resets, and you know he can continue. But it was destroying his life, man. He couldn't keep a job. He'd do this in restaurants. He was working in kitchens around fire and stuff. Yeah, hey, boiling pots. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and you know, in cars, he had gone off the highway and stuff before. Yeah. Anyway, so I was praying, asking the Lord, please let me lay hands on George, please. And one day we came around the corner to the house, and George said, "Oh, Johnny, it's starting." And he would always say it felt like ants crawling on his head. And he would go, "Johnny, I can feel it. It's like they're here." And I would always get him and lay him down. I'd try and always get him on the ground first before he passed out, because then it'd be dead weight. So anyway, when he told me that, I rounded the corner, I put my hands across him, and I pulled into the driveway. And then I heard the Lord say, lay hands on him. And I laid hands on George in the driveway. But when I did, it's like someone hit me in the chest, and I went boom, and I flung back, and I hit my seat pretty darn hard. And it felt like I got hit with a wave of energy, and tears were just rolling out of my eyes. And I was sitting against my chair in my vehicle like this after it happened. And all I could do was go like this. And I looked over at George like that. And George he was right here. Yeah. His head was like right, he was leaning over the console like, and I was like, oh, and he was like, Johnny, I didn't pass out. Oh my God, I didn't pass out. And he jumped out of that car, man, and he called his wife so fast, and he was jumping around, just celebrating, and his afflictions have been gone for good. Really interesting miracle from that is when George left my house, right after that, he got on the highway to leave, and I got on the highway, and I saw him driving. And when he's getting on the highway, my car's running out of gas. Wow. And I'm like, no. And so I coasted off the highway, and I pulled into a storage unit, you know, that rents storage space. And I pulled in, and I said, George, I'm running out of gas. Can you come back and help me? So he circles back around, and he gets out. And he opens the back of his like Suburban, and he had a leather jacket. Now it was really hot. I still remember it was hot. I'm thinking, what's he doing with the leather jacket in the back of his vehicle? Mm-hmm. And he goes, Johnny, I got to show you what it was like. You know what it felt like? It felt like this. And he put on his leather jacket, and he goes, it felt like that. And he just threw his jacket on the ground. He like peeled it off and threw it on the ground. He goes, that's what it felt like. And then the Lord said, look up the address, which was 555 Sunset, I believe, the storage unit. Oh. And I said, what? The Lord said, look up 555 in the Bible. And 5552 means to strip off like a garment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dude. And I was just like, ah. So yeah, that's, that's some, but there's just, you've been around, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot more.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's a whole lot of miracles, and the Lord's the one that picks and chooses. And just for everybody out there that's asked me, and that sent me letters or emails like, hey, I have this affliction, I pray for you, but if the Lord told me to go, I would go. I would drive across the nation just to go lay hands on someone that's sick. But here's the reality. These host bodies wear out and they get sick and they have ailments, and I have my own, yes?
Yep.
I deal with a lot of physical stuff.
Do.
I deal with my own stuff. Anyway, and the Lord kind of keeps me there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lord kind of keeps me smushed pretty good. I'm still got that thing on. Yeah, hopefully that'll be off in the next couple of days. But anyway, sometimes those ailments are your biggest blessings. So don't overlook it. Sometimes it's just like his way of making sure you stay close to him, and you don't really realize that. I didn't realize that, but in a lot of times that's what he's doing for you. He's doing it to help you. So just for the record.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing, Johnny. I appreciate it. Anything to leave off with?
Yeah, guys, I think we're getting real close. I did a part 2 of this video today with the drone stuff, and it all goes back to the beginning of the ministry. So just keep looking up, keep trusting, keep believing, and never think that the Lord's abandoned you, because if you've received him, he's there to stay. All right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Johnny. Thank you all for tuning in and checking out these interviews. Really appreciate you guys. And we'll see you guys next time. We'll be back at it.